At Fort Street Union Depot in Detroit. The road power moves back to the engine terminal for servicing. The passenger equipment follows, pulled by a Fort Street Union Depot switcher. This engine is a rare EMD NW5. These cars are being taken to the passenger yard for servicing. The premier train on the railroad is the Wabash Cannonball. Here we see it approaching Delray Junction. Note the open-ended observation car. On another day, we see the Cannonball again. This time, the tail sign is on display. Across the way, a Detroit and Toledo shoreline freight follows the Cannonball through Delray Junction. The Romulus Junction tower operator provides the stipulated roll-by inspection of the eastbound Cannonball. After an all-night run from St. Louis, the Detroit Limited approaches Detroit. We are at Fort Wayne, Indiana, just in time to catch the Cannonball departing the depot. We have now moved to Mexico, Missouri. Here, train number 3, the City of Kansas City Domeliner, has just made its station stop. The front end hosts EMD passenger jeeps. Highly spiffed up EMD F7 freight units are being readied at the Delray Roundhouse. The crews are polishing the windows and the mirrors. These engines will pick up their train at Oakwood Yard in Melvindale. And soon, Extra 1172 West departs Oakwood Yard with symbol freight SC1. Running at track speed, 12 miles out of Oakwood, train SC-1 passes the Romulus Tower and Depot. The Wabash crosses the C&O tracks here. Emery's camera caught some classic action shots of two eastbound freights between Romulus and Oakwood Yard. SC-1 is now a mile out of Oakwood Yard and crosses one of the contemporary concrete bridges on the Wabash. Here we see SC-1 further down the line as it heads for St. Louis. The Wabash Railroad also operated a car ferry on the Detroit River between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario. The car ferries allowed the Wabash access to trackage rights on the Canadian National Railway. This route through Canada ran to Fort Erie, Ontario, and over the suspension bridge to Buffalo, New York. Here, connections were made with the eastern roads. The car ferry Windsor arrives at the slips in Windsor. The Wabash used 3 car ferries named the Detroit, the Manitowoc, and the Windsor. The nicest view of the Detroit skyline is from the Canadian side of the river. And on another day, the Windsor arrives and docks at the outer slip. Wabash trains in Canada run on these Canadian national tracks along the Detroit River. Today, we see CN train number 17, the Intercity Limited, as it nears Windsor. Next, Wabash train number 27 arrives at the CN engine facilities in Windsor. The freight yard was to the left, and the train will pull into the yard. The road power returns to the engine facility. These F7 units were Canadian-built at EMD's facilities in London, Ontario. With the F units shut down, a visitor to Windsor this day is moved in the yard. The visitor is CN 484 number 6167. It is here for a railfan excursion sponsored by the Michigan Railroad Club. Near St. Thomas, Ontario, Wabash train number 27 crosses a spidery trestle. The baseball players in the field below hardly notice the great view. With both Detroit and Windsor skylines for a background, train number 28 comes through Walkerville, a Windsor suburb. This train is eastbound to Fort Erie. As a westbound departs Oakwood Yard, it passes Oakwood Junction. Here, the Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton tracks cross the Wabash. The conductor will pick up orders as the caboose crosses over the diamond. Train number KD-12 arrives at OJ Tower. As it crosses the diamond, we get a look at the concrete arches erected in the 20s. During that era, the DT&I was under the control of Henry Ford, who was experimenting with electric locomotives. Near the rear of KD-12 is a string of subway cars from the St. Louis Car Company. These cars are being delivered to the eastern seaboard. Next, a DT&I Jeep and caboose head south to their Flat Rock yard. The yard under the arches is the Wabash and DT&I interchange yard. Wabash train SC-1 passes through OJ Junction. The tower was closed and demolished in 1963, and crossing control was automated. Eastbound train KD-12 punches a hole in the winter fog as it crosses Romulus Junction. The power set has locomotives from Alco, EMD, and Fairbanks Morse. The westbound afternoon freight through Belleville, Michigan was led by a freshly painted E7 passenger unit with the new Wabash colors. Hot on the heels of the SC-1 is an extra flying white flags. Here, 3 F-7s are still in the old colors. And just west of Romulus, a local rolls by. At Milan, Michigan, another repaint job heading SC-1 crosses the Ann Arbor Railroad diamond. Looking south on the Ann Arbor, a northbound train comes to the end of the yard and waits for a southbound Wabash train to Toledo. The train will enter the yard, and the Ann Arbor train then proceeds to work the Milan yard. The Ann Arbor Railroad was at one time a subsidiary of the Wabash Railroad. The Annie was a north and south railroad, and with the east and west Wabash, they had favorable interchange at Milan. The Wabash heritage was always evident on the Annie, such as the paint scheme on the Alco FA2s. The scheme was precisely identical with the Wabash blue and gray. The only differences were the nose heralds and the railroad name. In these September 1963 scenes, the Ann Arbor was now into Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton ownership. The DT&I had purchased the Annie from the Wabash 9 months prior, at the end of December 1962. The effect of such purchases or mergers on the cosmetics of the railroad are neither swift nor sudden. The Annie we see here, for all outward appearances, still looked like the Wabash Annie. Its switching completed, the Annie local continues northbound. By the mid-60s, the Annie had acquired new motive power in the form of GP35s. The DT&I had traded in the Alco F units for 10 Jeep 35s. These were equipped with the power trucks from the trade-in Alcos. We are again at the familiar Milan interchange. This time, a Wabash GP7 switcher, number 467, handles the yard. We catch both railroads working their respective sides of the yard. The switching chores are now completed. The fresh new power for the Ann Arbor gathers its cut of cars and heads south to Ottawa Yard in Toledo. As DS-11 rolls past the Milan Tower, we catch more new paint. Following the DS-11 is the Montpelier turn. The local will pick up cars from Milan. The picturesque Huron River Bridge graces train SC-1. The bridge is located at French Landing between Romulus and Belleville. A GE U-25B on train SC-1 and a DT&I GP-7 wait their turn at OJ. Shortly, another U-25B on train CD-14 arrives at Oakwood Yard. SC-1 then departs on the adjacent track. One of Emery Goulash's beautiful sunset scenes graces train KSD-12 as it arrives in Melvindale. The symbol freight originated from Kansas City and St. Louis and is heading to Detroit. A winter sunrise highlights the Cannonball as it roars through Romulus on its way to St. Louis. An EMD E8 and an Alco PA, both in new colors, slowly pull the Cannonball through Delray Junction. A westbound freight passes the Milan Tower on a clear summer day. And shortly, a local pulls by. As the caboose passes, note the crew member dropping off the car list to the Milan agent. We move to Delray, where we catch a Chicago and Western Illinois Alco RS-1 switcher. The train is on lease to the Wabash and is pulling the train to Boat Yard. The usual on-time arrival of KSD-12 at Oakwood Junction heralds the departure of SC-1. Today, SC-1 is headed by a Fairbanks Morse trainmaster. The Wabash carried many automobiles and auto parts, as witnessed by the SC-1 consist. What you are witnessing is probably the last Wabash train out of Oakwood Yard. On October 16, 1963, the Norfolk and Western leased the Wabash Railroad Company with the intent to merge the two railroads. On this same date, the N&W did merge into their camp, the NKP and the AC&Y, as well as the P and WV railroads. As the winter of '64 set in, the evidence of the N&W acquisition appeared in subtle forms. One example is the fifth unit on this train set as it leaves Oakwood Yard. The N&W Alco C425, number 1000, was the first Invader Emery saw at the Oakwood Yard. Now, as Emery viewed the trains on the Wabash with mixed emotions, he wondered if he wanted to see the new and unusual N&W units, or was he still living in the world of Wabash? The Delray Junction trains were all Wabash. Most of these trains were local switch moves or transfers from Oakwood Yard to Boat Yard. This switch move through Delray wasn't exactly a stepped-up operation, but it was interesting to see the Wabash employees get down to work when they put their mind to it. The melding of the N&W was a subtle, relentless operation. Here, a high-nose N&W GP30 heads SC1 through Romulus. That configuration was truly an N&W image. Yes, the N&W has arrived. The next morning, Emery caught the Cannonball with a pair of N&W passenger cars. It is September 1966. N&W KSD-12 with a heavy block of reefers flashes past at Romulus. Some of these cars were still solid ice cooled. Note the brine spilling out of the overflows. By this date, the Wabash cabooses had long gone, and the red cabs were always N&W. An occasional Wabash F unit was a surprise, but these were buried in the power set and becoming faded and difficult to identify. By December 1966, a distinctive F unit led CD-14 through a gorgeous winter scene. Bellevue also had its perks. The eastbound freight was all N&W, but the westbound that passed by a bit later fronted a Wabash Blue EMD unit. By the end of 1966, now a full 2 years after the merger, virtually all vestiges of Wabash motive power had disappeared. Emery sadly accepted the decline and final fall of the Wabash flag. But wait, in 1966, would you consider the Wabash a fallen flag? It was, and it wasn't. In 1964, the N&W leased the 1,292-mile Wabash, and only in August 1991 did the two companies approve a definitive merger agreement to be voted upon in November 1991. N&W now owns 2/3 of Wabash preferred stock and 99% common stock.